In this video, I'll be going over the Yogg-Saron encounter with enough detail that hopefully, no matter which class you're playing, you'll have a proper understanding of how this encounter works as it relates to your class. In this first phase, you'll find a friendly NPC that stands at the center of the room named Sarah. Now the goal of this phase is to actually kill Sarah, and since you can't deal direct damage to her since she's friendly, the only way you can harm her is if you kill these Guardians of Yogg-Saron that, once killed, will explode and do AoE damage. The radius on the explosion is actually quite small, so you want to fight these Guardians standing right next to Sarah. The Guardians themselves, aside from exploding, will periodically throw out a shadow volley on the raid, and deals for moderate shadow damage, but additionally applies a debuff to anybody hit by the volley that reduces healing by about 25%. So you want to interrupt that as much as possible, especially if you're kiting these things around, because they'll stop to cast it. So always have someone who can interrupt nearby. I mentioned kiting because in the 25-man version, you can't have the raid standing in the center of the room with Sarah like they do in the 10-man version. You're going to have about 3 of these adds up at a time for the heroic, and what you're going to need to do is DPS them down low, and then once they're low enough, have a tank kite them all the way over to Sarah and have a small range group finish them off so that they detonate. And it's during that kiting process that if they stop to cast a shadow volley, it might throw off your timing and they could die early. The other trick to this phase are the clouds you can see moving around the room. Now they actually orbit at a fixed distance from the center and travel in a circle around. Hitting these clouds will cause another Guardian of Yogg-Saron to spawn, and your raid will be quickly overwhelmed if any raid member accidentally triggers one of these clouds. One last thing to mention about this phase is that Sarah will be casting 3 abilities, and the only one to really watch out for as a healer is called Sarah's Blessing. Now, it instantly heals a friendly target for about 27,000, but over the next 20 seconds will deal 60,000 damage, so it's a pretty heavy ticking dot. And you just want to make sure you're within range of everybody in your raid, especially when they're all ducking in and out of these clouds. Make sure no one gets too far away from the healers. And with that said, here comes phase 2. Your raid is going to split up into 2 groups at this point, one to stay outside and fight the tentacles, and one to go inside and attack Yogg-Saron's brain. Now I'm going to cover this phase twice, once for the outside and once for the inside group. Now outside you'll be fighting off constant waves of these tentacles. The first of these 3 are Corruptor Tentacles. They'll cast a Curse of Doom, a Black Plague, which is a disease, Draining Poison, which is a poison, and Apathy, which is a slowing magic debuff that reduces attack speed, movement speed, and casting speed by 60%. For the group that stays outside, these Corruptor Tentacles are probably going to be lowest on your priority of kill list. For the group that goes inside the brain, these are actually probably going to be your primary targets. When you're not inside, you're going to be wanting to clean up Corruptor Tentacles. Crushers will channel a spell that reduces raid damage by 20%, and you can counter this by just hitting the tentacle with a melee swing. These tentacles hit incredibly hard, so have your tanks on this, and have them only in range when they need to strike once, and then quickly move back out to avoid getting hit by an incredibly hard strike from the tentacle. And those should be your primary target, as having multiple crushers up will be disastrous to your raid's DPS due to those debuffs stacking. And lastly, you have Constrictor Tentacles, which just grab a nearby raid member. They have relatively low hit points compared to the other 2, so when they come up, you actually want to switch to those and kill them off as fast as possible. You don't want to lose a raid member to something that you could have killed in like 2 seconds. So just to recap, your main concern is going to be Crusher Tentacles. Kill Constrictors as soon as they come up, and leave Corruptors for when everything else is dead. If you're part of the group that goes and takes portals, you're only going to be on Corruptors because Crusher Tentacles hit melee so hard that you're going to lose members to that, so stay away from those. And clean them up as fast as you can. And that's pretty much what goes on outside during phase 2. I'm going to continue to talk a little bit about phase 2, but while I do, you're going to see the keepers here up on your screen. Just read this over. It gives a bit of a brief rundown of what each keeper does and how they help your raid throughout this fight. So, staying with phase 2, you'll notice that Sarah sticks around to harass your raid a bit. She'll throw out Death Rays, which you'll see 4 beams of light that kind of just path around the floor. They do 20,000 damage in 1 second, so don't touch these beams or else you'll find yourself dead pretty quickly. Another spell is called Brain Link. It'll tether two raid members together, and you'll have to stay within 20 yards of each other. If you go further than that, you'll find that your little tether beam will turn red and you start losing sanity and health. So stay close to each other and just wait for it to fall off naturally. You can, however, break the link early if you take one of the portals, if they open up in time, but since they're limited, don't take one unless you are assigned specifically to take a portal. As a member of the portal group, you're going to want to grab these portals as soon as they open up, so you want to be in position. And raid leaders try to assign certain members to different positions around Yogg-Saron, say, to the north, east, south, or west, or 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever you feel comfortable with. Once inside the portal, you'll find yourself in one of 3 different illusion rooms. In each of these rooms are going to be neutral mobs that you attack. They turn into tentacles, and then you kill them all off. Once all the tentacles are destroyed, you open up the room to Yogg-Saron's brain, and when that room opens, all the tentacles that are outside are actually frozen, and additional tentacles will not spawn. So the fastest you can open up this brain room, the better. Now, to speed this process up a bit, once the melee group is inside, have them split up and cover the left side of the room, and the other group cover the right side of the room. For the previous illusion that you saw, the Ice Crown one, you can actually send a group of people up the middle because there's a group of tentacles there at the back. But for the other two, you'll just need to go around the perimeter of the room. Now, this melee group will be taking damage from the tentacles. Every time they strike, they get hit for about 60% of the damage they did as Shadow. So make sure you have some sort of form of healing to go with that. And one last thing is that you'll find that there's these laughing skulls throughout these illusion rooms. You want to turn your characters back to these to break the channel. Otherwise, you're going to be losing a lot of sanity. So it's not enough to just rotate your camera. Make sure your character is physically not facing these things. And you're going to need to use this strategy for Phase 3 as well, because Yogg-Saron will do a very similar stare where he gazes at you, and if you don't turn your back, you lose sanity. So once the brain room is open, you go in and DPS the brain. And the whole point of Phase 2 is to get this brain down to 30%. And this usually takes about 3 to 4 portal phases on 25 man, hopefully no more than 4. And on 10 man, depending on how many guardians he sent down, you could probably do it in 1 if you're fast enough. Ideally 2, 3 at the most. And a minute after these portals initially opened up, Yogg-Saron will make anyone go insane that's still left inside, so you have to jump in these portals to get outside the brain again. So leave yourself a few seconds at the end there. Make sure you have about 5-6 seconds to run, grab a portal, and teleport yourself out before you get mind controlled. And then you're not doing your raid any good at that point. They'll have to kill you. Once Phase 3 starts, if you have enough time left over, I'd say anything over 5 minutes should be fine. You might want to finish up these tentacles. If there's a few corruptors, just send a melee out to go and finish them up. They can be quite a nuisance on your healers because it costs a lot of global cooldowns to keep cleansing Curse of Doom and such. So spare, a melee, have them go take them out. Now, during this phase, Immortal Guardians will be spawning on your raid. Your tank will have to pick these up as soon as possible, otherwise they'll walk up and probably one-shot a healer. And I'm sure healers will always have aggro on these things as soon as they spawn. So tanks, you have to be very quick with that. All DPS will want to get on these Guardians and bring them down as fast as possible, as they do less damage the less hit points they have. And once they reach 1 hit point, Thorn will strike them with lightning and they'll die. You can't actually kill them yourself. So keep that in mind. And other than those Guardians, Yogg-Saron is what you're going to be spending your time on. So you just want to DPS him down. When he gazes the raid, just turn your back to him and wait for him to stop, and then turn back around and continue to DPS him. If your sanity gets very low enough to the point where you don't want to risk getting mind controlled, just stand on the tank with your back to Yogg-Saron the entire time and just help DPS down the Immortal Guardians and let everybody else worry about Yogg-Saron. As a healer, as you can see here, I've shown you what it is to be a healer on Phase 3, and all you simply do is keep your back to the boss 100% of the time and heal, and it's easy mode. The key to success for this whole fight is not to get overwhelmed. In Phase 1, stay out of the clouds. In Phase 2, open up that brain room as fast as possible and freeze all the tentacles that are outside. And for Phase 3, stay on top of those Immortal Guardians and make sure they don't overpower your tank. And that's it.